It's hard to hate the tough guy.
Go ahead. Make my day.
Or at least that used to be the case.
Who are you?
Your worst nightmare.
Legends like Clint Eastwood and Sylvester Stallone dominated the box office for years and left their impact on a generation of young men. But as the media has evolved, so has the role of role models. Young men have been increasingly turning to fictional characters, public figures, and celebrities instead of the men in their lives. In our coverage of the crisis of masculinity, we're following Will Adolphi, who says his search for a place in society led him to a manosphere influencer who became like a father figure to him.
Influencers are people as well. And having a large voice, becoming famous, tapping into a zeitgeist without even knowing it, all of a sudden they found themselves with, like massive audiences, because there was a whole generation of young people, such as myself, who were searching for guidance.
A recent study found 47% of young men between the ages of 13 and 30 say they are looking for people in pop culture for masculine role models, whether it's fictional characters, public figures, or celebrities. It's the same report that found 43% of young men do not know what it means to be a man today.
We've seen over the last few years an increasing acknowledgement within our cultural discourse, within the media industry, around this notion of a crisis of masculinity, this sense of young men, boys in today's world are really struggling to understand what it means to be a man in 2025. My name is Fergus Neveratnam Blair. I'm the Vice President for Trends and Futures at National Research Group, or NRG. We work a lot with clients in the film and TV industry. We've heard a lot from them that they are really struggling right now to capture and to hold on to the attention of younger male audiences, especially given that they're competing for that attention against so many other sources of entertainment, from gaming to social video and social media, to international genres like anime and so on.
One of the big questions in the study was, who did you look up to as male role models growing up? More than half of young men, 52%, say most of their role models are the real people in their lives. But 26% said they looked to fictional characters, and 21% said public figures and celebrities were role models in their lives. Fergus explains the way Hollywood has portrayed masculinity has transitioned from the golden age to contemporary cinema.
So, if you go back to the 1960s, for example, you can see the way in which a lot of the depictions of masculinity of that era were very much informed by the countercultural energy of the time. Films like Easy Rider and Taxi Driver.
You talking to me? You talking to me?
And One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, all grappling with these questions of, how you can sort of defy the shackles of traditional social norms and traditional sources of authority. In the 1980s, you see the pendulum shift very dramatically towards a more unapologetically macho vision of masculinity. And you think about the cultural context of the time, you have the Cold War reaching its apex, you have Ronald Reagan in the White House, you have the conservative movement really in the ascendant within American culture. That reflects itself in the media of the time, and you see stories like the Terminator franchise.
I'll be back.
As you see stories like Rambo and these titles that are about sort of very unapologetically macho men, often in military roles or law enforcement roles, who are really have a really sort of physical sense of masculinity about them. Back in the 1990s, we start to see more of a preoccupation around how do you reconcile masculinity and modernity? And there's a lot of movies from that era of the 90s, movies like Office Space and American Beauty and Fight Club, another great example.
Is that what a man looks like?
Really about what does masculinity look like in the context of the modern information age, in the context of modern office culture.
When probably you and I were growing up, 70s, 80s, 90s, what you saw was a very narrow band of masculinity. It was primarily kind of white. There was very few Asian and Latino ever, and if they were stereotyped. And so particularly men of color, very negative images most of the time.
Matt Engler Carlson is a professor at Cal State Fullerton, focusing on the psychology of meta-masculinities.
And most of the men kind of fit into like one or two different categories, right? like the action hero, the bumbling dad or whatnot. Like, and now we see a lot more variety in terms of kind of men in different kind of roles.
As television and eventually streaming became a major vehicle for storytelling, Fergus says male characters transformed again.
You had shows like The Sopranos and Mad Men and Breaking Bad.
Now, say my name. Heisenberg.
They're all about these characters who sort of live outside of the law, these characters who defy social conventions, these characters who wear this kind of very rigid mask of masculinity.
But he says, with nearly endless options for entertainment, some of the most popular characters in film and TV have lost that hard edge.
You had shows like Modern Family and This Is Us and so on, you know, exploring, or Ted Lasso, another great example, exploring visions of masculinity that weren't quite so rooted in these ideas of physical strength and in these ideas of ambition and success and dominance.
Are you kidding me? I think concerts are rad. Hello, I was a hall raiser.
A what?
I followed Hall & Oates around the country one summer. Rich girl just spoke to me.
I think Hollywood's getting better at it because they're being policed more, if that makes sense. And I think there's some genuine efforts to kind of portray men in more adaptive roles. And I think that's the main piece. And you don't see the same expressive kind of violence, homophobia, and things like that anymore. And so Hollywood can be a beacon, except that stuff doesn't always sell. And Hollywood at the end of the day is going to be about the bottom line.
But with all the options today, it's harder to put your finger on what masculinity looks like in film and TV.
You don't see necessarily one concrete vision of this is what masculinity is in Hollywood in 2025. You see different actors, different entertainment brands playing with that concept in different ways and pushing it in different directions. And I think Timothée Chalamet is a great example of that, you know, trying to create this like newer version of masculinity that, you know, in something like Dune, he sort of balances the kind of the action hero element with the sort of philosopher king element almost a little bit. It's a very interesting narrative from that perspective. But, you know, he's also someone who's proven he's willing to explore visions of masculinity sort of outside of traditional heteronormative paradigms. Films like Call Me By Your Name, for example.
While Chalamet might illustrate a unique version of modern masculinity, NRG found that when it came to fictional role models in media today, no characters from movies and TV sets in the real world made the top 20. The top 5 were Spider-Man, Batman, Superman, Harry Potter, and Iron Man. The authors of the study point out all of this matters because it means that young men are gravitating toward a vision of masculinity that is, by definition, never going to be fully obtainable.
There are very few characters that young men are looking up to right now that are really rooted in the real world. And I think as we move forward as a culture, we need to think about what that's saying to young men.
When it comes to real-world figures young men are looking up to, it shifts between generations. Researchers found the top 5 for Gen Z and millennials were LeBron James, Martin Luther King Jr., Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson, followed by Presidents Donald Trump and Barack Obama. For Gen Alpha, Mr. Beast tops the list, followed by The Rock, LeBron, Steph Curry, and Cristiano Ronaldo.
Particularly younger men, when we look at boys 8 to 13, boys in their teenage years. A lot of that is driven by the world of sports. LeBron, a huge influence. People like Patrick Mahomes, for example, as well. People like Travis Kelce's of the world, the Mr. Beasts of the world, but also people like Kai Cenat, Theo Von, the Paul brothers, IShowSpeed, all these sorts of content creators, playing a really, really significant role in shaping what masculinity looks like to younger audiences these days.
That trend is even more pronounced as you look at what jobs boys in Gen Alpha aspire to. Video game streamers is number 1, followed by online video creator, and then social media influencer comes in at number 6, ahead of firefighter, police officer, and doctor. For parents worried about their kids' obsession with online creators, as Fergus points out, this is not a new problem.
The 60s, parents worrying about the impact of rock and roll and popular music, whether it's 90s and 2000s parents worrying about video games. Always have this kind of intergenerational conflict of trying to understand the messages that are being portrayed.
Instead, Fergus likes to focus on the positive forms of masculinity presented by some influencers.
A lot of these creators put a real emphasis on male camaraderie, male friendship. They make these videos with their crews of male friends that they're bantering around with and building these relationships with, this rapport with. They stand by these friends publicly. They incorporate them into their videos. I think that's an element that really appeals to a lot of young men.
But not all online influencers are the same. Adolphi's search for answers led him to an influencer.
And I started to watch stuff online, and I started to feel like, ooh, the world hates men, right? That idea started to come into my head. So I started listening to a lot of podcasts that were like oriented around how you can improve yourself. And then alongside that, I started hearing kind of intellectuals talk about the left, and it all started off very reasonable. The left's going a bit too far, right? A lot of the influencers I was watching, they were very, very resentful towards the left, right? Woke culture, political correctness, feminism. And that really lit a fire in me.
As Will became more and more into his influencer, he says it didn't offer the support he had been searching for. We'll delve into his content addiction and how he dug himself out to help other young men searching for answers in the next piece on the crisis of masculinity. I'm Craig DeGrelli.